Good afternoon. My name is Margaret Graziano, and I'm with Keen Alignment. And today I'm working with Tiffany Tremmel, who's the Chief Talent Strategist of CloudValve. Tiffany, would you like to say anything about why you're here today and what you want to contribute?
Yeah, absolutely, Margaret. Just first of all, good morning, good afternoon, I guess, whatever side of the world you're on. I wanted to say thanks for joining us for MORTAR. I really hope that you find value in what we're going to give you today. I want to provide you with solutions to some of the pain points that you have and possibly learn from my mistakes that I've faced throughout the years in the HR business. So I look forward to hopefully handing that over, some tools over to you all.
Thank you. So what we're going to talk about today is why an organization would need or want to transform their culture or elevate their culture or fix the unworkability that's happening in the human system. And then we're going to talk about some prescribed ways to do that, and we call it the MORTAR solution. And then Tiffany's going to share specifically throughout the entire presentation about the company that she's been working with and how she implemented some of these solutions and the problems they had and how it is now. And so that's called MORTAR in the real world. So what does MORTAR mean? MORTAR is motivate, onboard, rein in negativity, train people, align, and rewards and consequences. And when I look at all the work that I've done in my last 30 years, and specifically in the last decade with Keen, everything we do can be categorized in one of these categories. And so let's talk about that in a moment, but let's first discuss what's going on in the world of work and why a company would even need to focus on motivating, onboarding, reining in negativity, training, aligning, and implementing rewards and consequences. Well, 76% of the reason people leave their jobs are for preventable reasons. And when you look at this chart, 80% of what's on here has to do with culture or the way it feels around here, or how things get done and how the work gets done. So whether it's career development or work-life balance or management behavior, those are the top 4 categories of why people leave. And comp and benefits, yes, it's important. Money is important and that people can pay their bills, but it's not the number 1, it's the number 4. Well-being, we could call that stress. Job characteristics, it's you didn't really tell me what I'd be doing or I didn't know. Work environment is the climate. And then you have relocation, retirement, and then involuntary, which is the people who are being fired. They didn't want to quit. They were quit for. Tiffany, anything you want to say about this slide in specifics?
Right. Yeah, Margaret. When we started on this journey about 3 years ago, of course, these statistics were exactly what we were looking at. A lot of the top 3 or 4 issues are ones that we were facing, specifically career development. There was really no career pathing for people. People didn't feel a part of the organization or certainly didn't see a future. So our turnover was rather high, or a lot higher than it is right now. And then towards the bottom, you'll see retirement. And that was definitely a big concern for ours because we knew that we were going to have some what I would call positive turnover with, people looking forward to that next stage of their life. But no way, shape, or form had we prepared for that. And were we going to be able to transition at that point?
And I think, Tiffany, one of the things that you had mentioned is that people weren't telling you. They didn't trust the organization enough to tell you, hey, I'm retiring in 2 years or I'm retiring in 6 months. So it was a big secret.
Right. One example of that was that we had a manager, top tier manager, who had been rumored and talking about it in quiet. And we ended up finding out and having to, having that conversation and just trying to break the ice in terms of, hey, you're planning for your future and you're not willing to tell the organization. So it was definitely, some old school trust issues that had developed and, festered up in the culture that we had.
So let's talk about the workforce and why this is such an important issue right now. We have the largest number of newcomers coming into the workforce than we've had in 30 years. And over the course of those 30 years, the psychographic of what people expect from work, what they need from work, what they need in life has really changed. When I was 22 or 3, let's say in 1983, maybe I was 21, I was happy to have a job. I was told if I don't produce in the first 2 weeks, I would be fired. And that was normal way to talk to your employees. If we talk to a millennial that way right now, they would look at us like we were crazy. And what we're seeing in Silicon Valley, where I live, is in companies like Amazon and Google, the millennials are striking against the company. For example, at Google, the millennials were demanding that the cafeteria workers get paid better than minimum wage, or they were going to stop going to the cafeteria. And then at Amazon, the millennials again had a walkout and said, if you're not going to pay the laborers doing the shipping and the packing more money, we're not going to work. So we're seeing much more activity from this group of people pushing against the man or the system. And we're also seeing that if they don't like it where they are, they're going to go somewhere else. And there's enough other places for people to go. We also have a huge amount of people in the baby boom that are either retiring or changing the way they work. And then the people between the ages of 38 and 50, the people who have the experience, the people who have the background, the people who have the institutional knowledge, there's fewer of them than any other workers in the workforce. And it's about 50 million fewer. And these people are also at the point in their lives where they're starting to have kids or they have kids, and they're really struggling with, hey, do I spend more time at work or do I spend more time at home, or how do I do both? When I was growing up, there was not an option to go to the kids' play in the middle of the day or go to the baseball game. It wasn't done. It wasn't talked about. It wasn't even expected. And so all of that shifting. And then we have the psychographics, and there's a lot of attention being given right now to what the millennials need. And the millennials need vision, and they need to be self-actualized, and they need passion, and they need fairness and equanimity. But let's face it, all human beings that are working today are much more awake and aware to what's going on in the world, what's going on with climate change, what's going on with the government, what's going on everywhere. And we're all affected by all these external stimuli. And we want to go to a place that feels safe. We want to go to a place that we can be part of. We want to go to a place that we can contribute and we see a positive future and we can be excited about our work and that it's safe to work there. And what I mean by safe to work there isn't just that the machinery and the equipment or where we're located isn't going to harm us, but that it's safe to say what we need to say without retaliation, without feeling like there's going to be a ball of bricks coming down on us. And here's the thing, when people don't feel safe and they don't share, the business doesn't improve. It stays flat. So Tiffany, I know you had a few things to say about your experience at Cloud and the different generations.
Right, definitely. We've definitely seen a shifting of the guard and continue to see that. Of course, the baby boomer generation has started to retire, and we've seen a significant shift specifically within our management and executive ranks, where we have moved from our baby boomer generation to Gen Xers, millennial individuals, which has caused a lot of communication gaps, a big shift in how and when we communicate. And a lot of other initiatives that we focused on. I actually had a situation where myself and a plant manager who was a baby boomer, planning to retire. He didn't think very highly of me in terms of my abilities at the beginning. We really had little relationship, and our relationship was more focused on our differences than what we had in common. We became, through all the cultural work that we've done, we became accountability buddies, holding each other accountable for our growth. And we made that shift where we were more aligned in our similarities and actually became great, great friends. So it's kind of an example of how we've started to make that shift as a culture here at Clow, moving from, one of the differences that we see here, embracing those, but rising to the challenge that exists there.
And what I'd like to say about the gentleman who retired, he actually was the person who read an article that I wrote in a publication for manufacturing. And he's actually the person who brought that article to Tiffany and the general manager. However, when we started doing the work, he says, and he's a big, strong dude, and he's been there a long time, and he leads with the iron fist. And he said to me, and we do this program called the Level Set, and he said, so what you're telling me is you want me to apologize for damage I've caused when nobody that has ever been my boss in my whole life and my 40 years of work has ever apologized to me. You're asking me to do that? And I said, yes, I am. and he did it.
Yeah.
And he started to see that he was creating complacency and defensiveness and dependency because he was so oppositional. Because, and we won't talk about the destructive and constructive work cultures on this training, but when we have strong power, force, opposition, what happens on the other end is people go, I'm not even going to say anything. I'm just going to buy my time, collect my check, and make it out of here under the radar because I don't want to be attacked. And then problems don't get solved. And then the manager's doing everything themselves. So we've got 5 generations. Zach is just entering. He's kind of an intern. And Walter, World War II, he's still around. He makes a lot of decisions. He's on people's boards. He created a lot of the infrastructure. He might not be visible, but his presence and his infrastructure that he built is still very, very alive. And so constraining factors that are impacting companies with these 5 generations in the workforce and with the younger generation coming in and the older generation going out is the high cost of turnover. For an hourly worker, the cost of turnover is estimated as a minimum of 2 times their salary. Why? Because of the training that it takes to get them inoculated into the organization, and then the management time that it takes to replace them, and then recruiting time. With management people, it could be 5 times their salary. And we don't talk about it in this workshop, but I'm going to add it. Let's say the person doesn't leave, but they're extremely disengaged. The cost of keeping a disengaged manager is probably 3 to 4 times estimated by the Gallup Institute and Saratoga and Harvard Business Review, because they're there, but they're not fully executing. So they're not fully engaged. So 40% of their time is spent not moving the business forward. We have the dearth of leadership. Most organizations have not invested real dollars in teaching people to lead. They might teach them to manage. Have your one-on-ones every Monday at 1 o'clock, or hold people accountable, or this is how you do a performance improvement plan, or this is how you stay out of the courtroom for sexual harassment. But they're not teaching them how to tap into their innate natural talent and how to move their leadership forward through engaging with people and through understanding themselves. And it's the dearth of leadership that is really killing most of these organizations. What's also happening is there's this massive Me Too movement that isn't just about people being perpetrated. It's about women being fully empowered to lead. And in California, this is very, very interesting. The head of CalPERS, which is the California Pension Association, went to bat and just passed a law that any public company or state agency must have at least a certain percentage of women in leadership, because most of these major companies had no women on the board and no women in leadership. And I'll say from the majority of the work I do, we go in and we've got 30 men and 3 women. And that's kind of the way it is. And so our leadership has been very focused, or our management, on let's get it done and command and control and get people who are a distraction out of the way, or just get people out of the way altogether. And so what that causes is active disengagement. In the United States right now, the average average worker is 68% of the average people are who answered Gallup survey, the most recent, are disengaged with their company or their job or their boss. And there's the 7 levels of organizational effectiveness. And when people are operating in active disengagement, they're either in frustration or fear or hopelessness. In hopelessness, people are happy maybe 3% of the time, which means they're unhappy 97% of the time. When they're unhappy, they are not fully executing in their job. When people are in fear, they are happy 11% of the time, which means 89% of the time they are disengaged. When they are disengaged, they can't see all the elements of a problem because they're too busy in their own head trying to sort out everything that's not working. When they're in frustration, they're happy 20% of the time. When they go up into courage, they're happy 50% of the time. When they're in engagement, they're happy 70% of the time, and so on and so forth. So there's a direct linkage between the employee satisfaction factor, or the happiness advantage, and workforce productivity. So we also have the changing of the guard and an overall weak talent strategy. Tiffany, in your organization, when you started with us 4 years ago, tell us a little bit about the talent strategy that ClowValve had.
Yeah, 4 years ago, I just want to say something about overall this particular slide in general. When we picked up the phone and gave Maji a call, we were facing every one of these, and every area that we mentioned just now was a concern. Weak overall talent strategy is, putting it lightly, there was no building on the future. There was no alignment within the organization. There was no purpose-driven culture. And we were very reactive in terms of how we did business. And to call it a talent strategy, those were foreign words in these laws. Again, very old school manufacturing. It was employees. It was, heck, just an example, I was the industrial relations manager. So that if that doesn't say how old school we were, I don't know what does. But we had to definitely dive into each one of these areas that she just talked about and understand how we were going to get better. Our GM, I always like his line, he wanted to bring people to work for more than just a paycheck, and knew that these constraints existed, but we had a hard time putting a thumb on how we were going to remove them, which is how we originally went down the road of improving our culture.
And I think there was some kind of massive turnover, right, with new hires in the foundry. What was happening there?
Yeah, so we were seeing a definite turnover and definite what I'll call minor rebellion against the systems that were in place at the time. We had a number of people who were retiring, and then we had a number of new team members that weren't interested in coming to work in the environment or with the team that we had at that point.
Thank you. So let's look at what's next. So we are facing the perfect talent storm, which is, not perfect for all of us doing the work, but it is what's so. We've got demographics happening. We have the psychographics. People are much more aware of what's going on in the world and their options than they have ever been before. Disengagement, even though it's went up 3 points in the last year, it's still quite low, and it has been plummeting for the last 15 years. And disengagement has everything to do with trust. And we could talk about that more too. the dearth of leadership, a thriving economy. And even if we go into the doom and gloom recession, there's so much happening with technology, so much happening with disruption, that even a recession will have job growth, they're predicting. We've got the Me Too movement, which is more than just you've been mean to me and you've sexually harassed me. It's government passing laws that women need to get attention. And this bullying, we've also had stuff happen where CEOs of major companies have been ousted because of bullying and civil suits. And then, of course, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, the blockchain, disruptive technologies. It's all coming at us at once as we're in this 20 years in of this new millennium. And if we can take numbers, financials, and we start to look at, I have a customer that does clean water in Tennessee, and we were all in a meeting called the Ideal Culture Kickoff. And I went around the room after we started talking about some of this, and I said, how many of you feel like you are unproductive 10% of the time? And a few hands went up. And I said 20% of the time, and more hands went up. And one of the executives said 50% of the time. And almost all the hands went up. And the CEO, like, he's a money guy, but the color went out of his face. And it was really hard for him to hear. But the truth is, they had set up in their organization from old school, this department against this department, against this department, against this department. And I think, Tiffany, you had a few things happening like that at Clower. It was not one unified leadership team.
No, prior to us working on our culture, our leadership team, I didn't even enter the same room together. We had two facilities that were direct customers of each other that did not even communicate in terms of how they were doing business. So to say we were out of touch and that the issues that you just talked about or the obstacles, the outside climate was affecting us was definitely an understatement.
So the Work Institute Retention Report has done some numbers, and the cost of turnover in the US, just for US companies, this is not international, is $536 billion as of last year, right? So this is what companies are reporting. When you do the math, it's 2% of the gross domestic product. So if we just look at whatever your revenues of your company, if you're a $100 million company or a $500 million company or an $800 million company, 2% off the top is approximately what it's costing. If you could do those numbers and you could show your leaders the impact of their behavior or behavior that they're stepping over, it's a good way to get attention. Gallup also did a research study, and by the way, and we'll talk about them in a minute, so that companies that emphasize culture, and when I say emphasize culture, hire for culture, have culture and values weaved around the entire human system, from hiring to onboarding, to how people are managed, to how people are developed, to how people are trained, and it's done with core values, they outproduce by 202% as far as growth. And then when you look at bottom line revenue, it's 147% increase. So let's say integrity is a core value, or trust is a core value, or achievement is a core value. And I understand the behaviors that lead to achievement. And I interview for those behaviors, and I onboard for those behaviors, and I coach managers how to create those behaviors in other people. When people are forced and put down, they're not going to be inspired to produce. Fear doesn't work anymore. Fear is broken. Fear is command and control. And there's a great story of this. Microsoft was one of the leading innovators. I'm going to go there. It was one of the leading innovators. And they stopped innovating, and they grew into an extremely disjointed culture where it was extremely competitive. And from what I hear from people in the valley, Oracle has now started to become this way, where it was dog eat dog, one manager pitting another manager against another, and even like going to the CEO and saying, listen, you should fire so-and-so because they're not doing their job. Well, Satya Nadella, and he wrote a book, and if you Google his name, Sayta Nadella, And Tiffany, I know you're getting much more involved in culture. This is a beautiful story to read about what the right CEO can create. And he created a social enterprise out of Microsoft. And if you see their commercials, it's all about disabilities now. So they have this big social enterprise that they are still innovating technology, but they're making technology available for anybody, anywhere, and even for people with disabilities, with no hands and no legs. And he not only took the social enterprise for the outside world, he said, how do we start treating people at our own company with the values that we want to have? And he's all about capturing the collective soul of the organization, because when people come together for a common cause, they will outproduce people who are working for their individual goals. And there's so much research on this right now. So Satya Nadella is a great resource. So let's go into the solution. What is MORTAR? MORTAR begins with motivating, having a purpose for the enterprise beyond making money, so people can experience what a purpose really is. So in the company that makes clean water, they do water filtration all over the world for pharma, for beverages, and for government, for the ships that the boys are on, and the girls. They desalinate water. They didn't have a mission, and they created that they create clean drinking water for a healthy world. And everybody, including the welders, woke up to that everything they were doing was creating clean drinking water for the world. Before they had a company-wide mission session, they didn't even get that they did that. And they also paid almost no attention to the welders. And when these machines went out into the field and they were in the middle of the Pacific and the Atlantic or the Indian Ocean, and they stopped working because something was welded wrong, there was no connection between what the welders were doing and the end delivery. So when we instill a purpose, when we have a mission, we not only can have a mission that inspires people, but each and every role is connected to that overall mission, so people start to feel their purpose. And self-actualization is one of the top drivers of employee engagement today. So Tiffany, what was Clow's mission before the work we did with you, and what is it now?
Well, before the work that we did with Keen, we did not have a mission. I work for a manufacturer that makes waterworks products, so similar to the example that she just gave. We make valves and fire hydrants. So in order for people to have clean drinking water and for people to be, rescued from fires, they rely on our product. And there was little connection between the people in the organization, definitely the organization as a whole, or the job that they did. And then after we went through our strategy session, we created a mission and a vision and values. And our mission is that Cloud provides the world with life-sustaining water products through service and manufacturing excellence. And that was really, one of the initial steps that people identified with. And we started down the path, which I'll talk about a little bit later, in tying everybody to that mission and letting them know that they really had a purpose and that they were in charge of saving people's lives. I mean, how connected do you feel to being able to save a life? There's nothing better than that. That really took people out of, their day-to-day monotonous role of, well, I put bolts on a hydrant. No, you do much more than that. We showed them videos of what our products do out in the field to really drive that systems thinking so that they know that they're a part of a much greater cause.
Great. So we can't inspire others. We can enroll them in what's possible when they create a purpose for their career and their employment that is linked to the overall purpose of the enterprise. So onboarding, this is really a very vulnerable point for new people. They need to see the vision, see the future of why they said yes. Where can they go with our organization? How can they contribute? They need to understand our operating values and what it is that we need to do and how do we need to be so that we can forward this mission of the business. And they need to relate to their job as more than just a task. So Tiffany, I know you have a really good example of onboarding and how it was and what didn't work, and then the cool things that you did to change that.
Yeah, so our new onboarding process, we actually created an initiative team. So we had people stepping up that were seeing that we had gaps in how we were bringing people in, and there was absolutely no focus on the vision. There was absolutely no focus on values, the overall culture of the organization. There was a lack of expectations on how people needed to be in order to be a part of the Clow brand. You know, it was kind of a sense of just anybody got to fit in and walk in the door. And we wanted to move beyond that, where, hey, it's an exception to be a part of our group. We went from, you know, an onboarding process, especially on the HR side, that was very compliance-driven, dry, you know, some benefits information, policy, procedure, to changing that around and making it much more interactive process. First of all, we were changing the process into how we hiring for the values and the behaviors that it took to fit into that role and to fit into the culture that we were wanting to create. But then we also created a very broad systems perspective for people to see. So not only do they see the job that they work in, but they get tours of every area of both plants, so they can identify with how their role connects to the big picture. We created a number of videos that tied them into the big picture, such as our Life of a Hydrant video, which shows, you know, from concept to completion, what our product does and how they are a piece of that, and a piece of, again, providing that life-sustaining waterworks product.
Awesome. And what I can say is part of that onboarding process, there was a team of people who reverse engineered how fire hydrants built. And one of the things we saw with Clow is that the customer focus, they were disconnected from the use. Like, we know we make fire hydrants and we know people use fire hydrants and we know they're important, but they were disconnected that if they didn't show up at work, there might not be a shipment that goes out to a whole community. And what this improved is that connection, that ability to see how they relate. So reining in negativity, whether it's forceful behavior, whether it's somebody says, I want to get better, and then they backslide, or whether it's somebody that makes promises and breaks their promise, it's all negative. Even gossip is negative. When one person goes to another person and said, God, my boss is such a jerk, and then the third person says, yeah, my boss is a real jerk, and then you got four, and they're all talking about their boss as a jerk. By the way, that's taking away from them being productive. So negativity is in every single organization, and we have to have a way to work with reining it in. And it does take the leader's commitment that they will have a constructive way to deal with conflict, a constructive way to deal with gossip, a constructive way to deal with communication. So people, in the absence of communication, people make things up. So we need a constructive way to rein that in, because mostly nobody's making up anything positive. They're making up negative things and then sharing those negative things with others. So what causes negativity? It's high expectations unfulfilled. So now the manager's angry, they go into frustration, and they take that frustration out on other people. No one does that on purpose. That is a learned behavior. Now, just because they get aware and awake to that it's a learned behavior, and that's not really the best way to inspire people, it doesn't mean they'll change. They have to have a fundamental belief that they need to change. And then, many, many good intentions people have. Most people don't go into the workplace with bad intentions, but the assumption is that people are doing things on purpose. So somebody has a great intention and they feel thwarted. Management changed the policy, or management interfered because they're micromanaging, or they have a lack of trust. So they come in and they thwart it, and then that person feels like, wow, all my efforts, all the work that I did is gone for naught. And then they go into either hopelessness or fear or anger. but they don't get jazzed up when they put a lot of effort into something and then it's torn apart. And it goes both ways, manager and employee. And then the worst thing about negativity is this undelivered communication. Most companies have a very weak system for communicating changes or enrolling people in changes or communicating something that's happening in the business. And so undelivered communications. So let's say a person has a positive communication, like I need to acknowledge Mary, she just made all these changes in her department, she's doing really well. Well, I'll wait to her one-on-one, or I'll wait to her performance review because I don't want Mary to get a big head, so I'll hold back. That's an undelivered communication. An undelivered communication is also, I worked really hard on this project, I put 1,000 hours, and now you're saying that we're not going to use any of it. I'm really disappointed. I know there's nothing I can do about it, but I'm really disappointed. Most people don't communicate their disappointment. They just hold on to that disappointment. So it's really a strategy for dealing with setbacks, upsets, and disappointment. So Tiffany, I know you all created a strategy around communication. Anything you want to share about that?
Yeah, we did. Another one of the big focal points of our initiative teams, people from throughout the organization. This was really one of our communication overall. That last, bullet down there was a huge pain point for us. The lack of communication, I should say, along with the other issues that happen in terms of the expectations and good intentions. But we created a communication strategy that really involved things that were proactive in nature. We created all hands meetings that happened every month, so that management and supervisors could get together with all the hourly team members and answer questions, deliver, communications regarding changes or updates to the company message. We had things like newsletters. Again, making sure that people felt a part of the organization and making them a piece of that, branding and getting our name out and making people a piece of that. Our communication group was greatly involved in the videos that I talked about earlier. And then we created a presence on the floor for all of our managers, a strategy around the amount of time that our supervisors needed to be spending on the floor, our managers, so that we could deal with all the garbage that was out there, all the gossip, all the meetings that were happening after the meetings, because people wouldn't communicate. So things got swept under the rug a lot. And then again, people would talk about it and undermine everything that management or supervisors said because they weren't comfortable with delivering that proactively.
So training. This is an interesting concept because most CEOs want behavior to change, but they want to do this and have behavior change. They just want other people to change. They don't want to look at themselves. And if the CEO is not aligned and a power player, meaning an inspirer and they have to drink the Kool-Aid. And I was talking to a CEO of a very large company, 12,000 employees, the other week, and he runs Underwriters Laboratories. And he said the day he got there for his job, he went into HR and he said, "What's the training budget?" And HR said, "We don't have one." He said, "Well, you do now." And he has mandatory training. Anybody who wants to be a leader in that organization has to go through human development training of how to deal with their ego, how to deal with their frustration, how to be responsible for their impact on the space, how to set goals, how to make those goals, break down those goals into a reality, how to performance coach. So it's all the personal work on themselves, which is exactly what our program at Keen does. And I've had leaders, including people close to this call, say, "Why would we want to train our people? Then we'll train them to leave." And then someone says, "Well, why would you train them? Why would you not train them and have them stay?" We don't want to keep people dumb and numb because they can't take our business forward. And we must have people innovating and moving the organization forward. If we're not good enough for that company and they leave us, that's our problem. That's something we need to do. But we don't want to keep people in the dark, called mushroom management, keep them in the dark and feed them crap. We want to teach people how to resolve problems, how to get over their upsets, how to negotiate, how to resolve conflict. And so we're entering a world of lots of disruption with technology. It'll close off a third of all jobs that are repetitive, that can be done by a machine, will be done by a machine in the next 10 years. So we need to teach our people skills. We need to teach our people how to relate with people. We need to teach our people how to be resilient. And all of that is not the kind of training that most companies are buying. Most companies are buying self-esteem training or assertiveness training, or we'll send you to the Management Institute and you'll learn for 2 days how to be emotionally intelligent. That the kind of training they need is interactive, experiential, where they're literally practicing and pushing up against their own beliefs and dismantling their limiting beliefs so that they can learn these new behaviors. So Tiffany, I know you have some things to say about training.
Yeah, training, I was one of those companies, and still this is a work in progress for us because, training is one of those things that can sometimes be hard to provide the ROI for. But one of the big things that we did was we focused on our leadership. We focused on 21st century leadership training to address all of those issues that Maji talked about. And it was definitely an uphill climb because we were very comfortable in how we had done business. And that was more of the technical aspects of our job. Again, coming back to the idea that we were very old school in how we operated. We had generations of families who had been here and learned, from the best of their family members on how to operate. And so that was a big mountain for us to climb. But we slowly have started to chip away at that. And not only are we introducing that to, our leadership, but have introduced, cultural training to our hourly people, and saying, hey, it takes a lot for us. And just like we give you safety training or just like we give you on-the-job training, it's now important for you to understand the rules of the game when it comes to our culture and our expectations that way too.
Great. Now I want to talk about aligning, connecting people's heart to their head and having people aligned with the work they do. So Tiffany, I want you to take this one.
Yeah, so in terms of alignment, alignment's important in order to get everybody really rowing in the direction, in the same direction. I mentioned our mission and our vision and our values. That was really, I believe, where the light bulb came on in terms of understanding that we had a lot of silos within the organization and people moving in opposite directions. People weren't connected to what they did at work. They didn't connect the dots between the work that they did and what they were doing it for. We all have a commonality in why we work, and that's because we want to take things home to those that we have at home. And we hadn't created that purpose. We hadn't created that connection. We started to work on that by understanding that our mission, vision, and values were a primary source of how we operated and how we connect the dots for people. We wanted people to see that they were a part of that big picture. When we started this, leadership didn't even have any goals. The leadership wasn't aligned, so you could only imagine, the hourly and the operators on the floor and how disconnected they were. Again, going back to how we worked to improve that, some of the tangible things that we did. Again, we created initiative groups surrounding aligning our culture. We had people raising their hand saying, hey, how exciting is it if I can be a part of getting people excited about their work. We worked on creating all of our what we call CPRs, comprehensive position requirements, understanding how and connecting the dots for people who couldn't see that system because it had never been done before. We ended up with initially 12 initiative groups that were working on things such as onboarding, our compensation group. We had a hiring group. We had our quality assurance group, manufacturing excellence. So it really started to stem out into the whole organization. And we had people from all walks of life throughout the organization who took part of this and became a strong, cohesive unit of aligning people, throughout the organization.
Awesome. And then rewards and consequence. When I first took my human systems, which is an organizational development specifically around culture and change management, every person, and even on our assessment that we give where it ranks 79 leadership competencies and the top 6 categories, the lowest score globally is on accountability for others. And it's so desperately needed everywhere. And that's the consequence piece. We all want to give reward. I mean, most people want to give rewards and accolades and tell people you're doing a good job. But when it comes to saying, hey, wait, that didn't work out the way we wanted it to work out, or you promised me you would do this and you didn't do this, and we need to start over and clean up. Most leaders are weak in that category and really need to be developed. And so in the human system transformation of culture, a big piece of it is a high performance culture needs to have success markers. They need to know when they're doing a good job, and the leadership needs to pat them on the back, acknowledge the work that they're doing. I said to somebody this morning that I delegated and empowered, like trained her to teach people how to do IMX debriefs. I said, Christine, the difference you're making for our consultants and our clients is amazing. And you give them so much space to be free to fail and free to learn. And she started crying, like that I saw her. And that's what she said. She said, I feel seen. That's all anybody wants, is to feel seen. They don't want to get off the hook. They don't want to go around and not do things. I had another consultant who was supposed to send an email and didn't send an email. And he gave me a call and said, hey, I broke my word and I want to clean that up with you. And I just said, yeah, I'm disappointed. And then it was over. It was over. He's rather than focus on what he did wrong, we need to give people the opportunity to focus on what they're doing right and have an agreement about what happens. What's the consequence for not sending an email or not following up or not delivering a great coaching? There needs to be a consequence. And that's in every company, and every single human being needs help with that. But before we can get better at holding accountability, we first need to look at what's in our own way. Is it that we have a conversation that we need to be everybody's BFF, or we want everybody to like us? Once we start to see that whatever got us to this point in our career will not get us to where we want to go, and maybe one of the gaps is accountability or consequence, then we could start build it in. And it doesn't have to be a consequence like you screwed up, you're fired, you're a loser. It could be a consequence like when you break your agreements, you need to clean it up before the broken agreement. As soon as you know you're going to break it, you got to clean it up. And, we're going to work with you on it. If it turns into your normal behavior, then you probably don't fit here. But you got to give people an opportunity to be humble and fail forward and learn and deal with their stuff. But there is no straight line in any road. We've got to acknowledge growth and success. And by the way, the last thing I want to say about this is kudos and acknowledgement and rewards for most human beings, because of our lovely friend, our ego, slides off of us like Teflon or water on the back of a duck. And correction and consequence and you're wrong is like Velcro. It sticks, and we keep building this thing in our neuro pathways about what's wrong with us or what we're not capable of. And that is an old school way to management. That is command and control. And they keep people feeling small so that they break down their self-esteem and that they don't feel confident enough to leave. And it happens all over the place. So Tiffany, I want you to talk a little bit overall about how CLOW was. And you've done a great job so far, but just to kind of wrap it up, what you wanted when you called, and then we'll go to what you got.
Yeah, so in terms of the CLOW, we picked up the phone initially because we knew we wanted more. We could see a pure disconnect. Both myself and the GM at the time were new to our positions, but not new to CLOW or not new to the organization. So we had been, raising some of the issues before, just weren't in a place to actually definitively take action. We really wanted to have a culture where people had a purpose, where people came to work for more than just a paycheck. We wanted, alignment in the system that drove the things that you were just talking about, reinforcement of positive behavior through reward, and accountability through consequences. We knew that, in terms of the changing of the guard that was going to happen, we were going to have a significant shift in retirement. And if we didn't take action and we didn't do it in a rather quick manner, then we were going to be even worse off in terms of where we were going. Again, that the poor strategy that we had in terms of communication and overall just a lack of a cultural or system strategy for the organization.
And then tell a little bit about, well, I'll start and then you can, actually, I think we said you were going to take this slide too. So you go, take it away. What were your steps?
Right. So we did a few very definitive key points in terms of our cultural transformation. I think, if you just look at the picture on this slide, it kind of, it shows and is very symbolic. I'm on the ladder, pulling the GM up. And in order to get there, it was a big transformation, leadership level set, a strategic advance, aligning all of our key roles with our vision, management, 21st century leadership training, human resources, really getting inside. It was easy for me to say from an HR perspective that we knew what we needed to do, but we weren't doing it and hadn't taken the steps. So we had to start with ourselves and the management team so that we could, create this cultural vision, conscious hiring, and then our cultural coalition, which is all those initiative groups, and really, spreading that out into different various aspects of the organization and people who were passionate about this.
Yeah. So what I saw in CLOW is that there wasn't already always thinking from the general manager that people just want, even though he didn't want people to come to work for just their paycheck, but his belief was people only wanted to be in the box that they were in. And people, as they woke up, as they went through these level sets, they were like, I want to help. I want to help. I want to make this a great place to work. And there was a big mistrust at the beginning that this was just another, idea that wouldn't last. But over the course of 18 months, they really got an army of, I would say, 25% of the organization to band together and say, we're changing. And it all began with the level set. And in the level set, the leaders, specifically the leadership team, comes together and clarifies their purpose as a leadership team and what they want to create as a business. So we begin with the end in mind. And then we give them some experiential exercises so they could start to see how fragmented they are. And then in the debrief process, which is very powerful in experiential learning, we start to look at what's the impact day to day in your company, what's really not working, what's holding you back. And there's deep trust that is created in those 3 days. And they learn this a distinction called response agility. It's about resiliency and how to say what's not working without condemning people or making people wrong. We teach a methodology to dismantle upsets and really dive into what does it mean to truly empower people, not just point at them and say, you're empowered now. And this is a 2.5-day program, very powerful. We come to the geography of where the leaders are. But this requires whoever is the leader of the pack to say, I'm up for this. We need this. We need to be one company. And then the strategic, sorry, they are pounding the wall upstairs. So I'm getting distracted. The strategic advance, this is where we create the mission, the purpose, the reason the company exists, not just for money, but what's the reason? Nobody's going to sign up to work for you if you say, well, we make money. You're supposed to make money in business or you shouldn't be in business. But what's the purpose? What difference do we make in the world? How do we make the world a better place? What are our values? How do we treat each other? What's the expected behavior? And so this is a very interactive process where everybody's coming together. They're co-creating. The beauty of this is it's not just done in a silo in one or two rooms. And then we've got the role analysis, which Tiffany talked about, aligning each and every role to the purpose of the enterprise and giving each and every role performance metrics that are linked to the company performance metrics. So if the job could talk, the job would say, this is what I need to be done, and this is why my job exists. And what happens is you get much less drama around performance management because the person in the role is in this conversation. It's co-created. And Tiffany, I know you have a couple stories or one story to share about how people woke up in this process at your company.
Right. Yeah, we've created over 100 roles now. So there's been quite a few, but a couple of very touching stories. Most of them happen with people who, have been in the role for quite a while. A lady that has worked with the company for over 35 years. She's over 60 years old, has been doing the same thing, day in and day out. If you ask her for the whole time she's been employed, and really had no connection to what she did as the metal casting facility clerk, and how she was tied into the big picture. We created a CPR meeting and to put that together, and she came to me and she was visibly shaken and scared and said, I feel like people are going to make some new expectations for me that I'm not going to be able to deliver on, and I don't know what all this means. And so we had a good conversation, and then after the CPR meeting, she walked out of it, not as the metal casting facility clerk, but as the metal casting facility administrative coordinator. And she was beaming with pride and said, hey, I know what I do makes a difference now. And you could really just see that connection for her, and it had finally landed.
Awesome.
So it was inspiring to see.
Awesome. So 21st century leadership, this is about who the person is as a leader in themselves. We begin with self-awareness, what works, what doesn't work, not making people feel bad like that they're insufficient, but what's the gap and where do you want to be and who do you want to be as a leader? And then training in the ability to respond and what does it mean to have an executive brain and how do we apply both sides, and personal accountability and neuroplasticity. So we bring in science so people get a lot less emotional when you're telling them this is just kind of the way the brain works and we're going to help you. And we're really supportive in that process. And then whole systems thinking, looking at connecting the dots between their behavior, the people that work, and the big picture. I don't know why, but we have voices on here. It's weird. So last but not least, we've got the human systems. And Tiffany said that they went through an HR systems transformation, and she got to look at every process in HR, from how people get one-on-ones to how they're onboarded to how they're hired. She's been sharing a lot about that. We call that human systems transformation, where we're weaving the values and the mission into every experience people have. And is it perfect? No, of course it's not perfect, but we're setting up a structure so that more time than not, people have an experience that the company is walking their talk. And it builds deep trust in HR and deep trust in leadership. And Tiffany's also talked about the Culture Coalition, getting people to volunteer that they want to help and work on a project. And they built cross-functional teams of diverse work groups where people were collaborating and they felt included and they owned what they were doing and they were moving the company forward. Had Tiffany and her team tried to do everything alone, it would have failed. And they did it as part of a work group. And so she's talked a little bit about that. And then to conclude, I'd like you to talk about the tangible results that under your leadership, you and I and other people who participated produced at CloudValve in 18 months.
Right. Obviously, ROI is everything, and making a business case. So these are of the utmost importance and something that we were all excited about. In terms of the shift, we were down in turnover from 9% to 6.9%. That was a huge shift in just over a year's time. We had a 6.6% rise in revenue, 2.6% rise in gross profit. And for a company, with our income levels, that's a sizable amount. 1.5% increase in net profit reserves and 1.4% increase in net profit. So, those are the type of tangible results that you can take home to, your business partners and say, hey, these types of things really do work. Culture is important. Bringing people and creating new human systems is important. Aligning your workforce is important. All things that we were able to measure in a year's time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And just as a completion, there's 6 C's of shaping culture. See, I was shaping. First is complacency. Just get it fixed. I don't want to do anything about it, or not even acknowledging anything needs to be fixed. But the moment the leaders become curious, start asking questions and start doing surveys and starting to dig in, then it goes to the level of commitment. We're going to do something about this, and you need the commitment or it just won't work. Then there's catalyzing it, taking it out of just the leadership team and bringing it to the entire enterprise. And then it's asking the questions, how is this impacting our customer experience, our end user experience, our market share? And then there's continuous improvement. It's not a one and done deal. You can get kind of like a aha in a one and done deal, but it's a journey. Tiffany was on the journey for 18 months. I've got clients who've been on the journey for 5 years. I've had some clients who've been on the journey for 8 years, but we do a lot less with them after 8 years than we did at year 1. So, how can you learn more? Keen Alignment offers private one-on-one coaching specifically for people on the leadership team, for people who are dealing with wanting to get to a new level in their career. We also work heavily with the HR practitioners who are committed to being cultural change agents. We have an online curriculum. We have a program, Train the Trainer. We also do retreats with HR people. We do retreats with organizations. And then we have the Keen Institute. If your company says, we don't have the budget, but they're going to give you $55 a month, you can sign up and be on in our program where you're getting live training and automated training on a regular basis, and you get all of our content available to you. So those are the 3 ways. And then we have a Transform Your Culture from the Inside Out workshop that we are hosting in the Bay Area from October 16th to 18th. And that is another opportunity to join us. In that program, you're going to create your own culture roadmap. You're going to create a talent strategy. And so we invite you to consider participating, and we have an opt-in for that on our website. So if you're interested, just send an email to Magi at Keen Alignment, MAGI at Keen Alignment. Thank you, Tiffany, so much for your time today.
Thanks for having us.
I love every time you tell your story because it's a sign of personal growth and courage and tenacity and really taking a company from 140 years old to the 21st century in 18 months, and just your willingness and your
Well, it looks like we lost Maji there at the very last second. Good timing because it was at the end of the entire webinar. So anyway, thank you everybody for participating. Thank you, Tiffany, for joining us and co-hosting, and we will be sending up a follow-up.
Yeah, thanks everybody. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yep, have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.